Okay, we got a release party on our hands. Um, so far so good. We posted. The post I think is fine. And then, all right, why is that so small right now? That's better. Okay. Um, yeah, we got our post out. Everything I think looks good. Everything's got the stuff that we want. We got a good description and everything. Got all these guys going in. Got the bibliography going. Everything's good here. We've got our post on r/consciousness. Has a ton of comments, not many upvotes, of course. So yeah, we gotta just deal with. We gotta talk through this stuff. Oh, we got 8 likes. Yes. Yo, Filcher, welcome back. Back for more. So I think I'm just gonna go over comments and stuff from the video that I just posted. Just to also, if you want to talk about anything, let it rip. I'm kind of curious what. I guess I really don't know too much about e to the pi, like what type of content that is. I should actually check. We should do that as well. He's a mathematician. Oh, cool. Nice. Oh, look at this. Yeah, we need to get a board of some sort. But this is good stuff. Yeah, I guess what
But yes, this is exactly how you do it.
what kind of stuff is he usually working on? Is it just kind of general education, just going over different types of concepts that people are asking for, or does he have something that he's working towards? Is there overarching topics that I guess he tackles? His PhD is in mathematics education. Nice. His moniker is a play on the famous Euler formula. Okay. That makes sense. Right, e to the 2I pi. Okay, I think I kind of remember that, but it's been a while, maybe like 10 years. He'll often talk about math, pedagogy. Is it pedagogy? Is that how to pronounce that? In particular, but usually he's either addressing questions from chat about topics. You're in, right, e to the pi. Pi times I equals -1, right? Okay. Yeah, that's the classic equation. Either addressing questions from chat about topics they're interested in, or he's doing whatever he's interested. Nice. That's kind of how we do it here. So okay, is 1. Nice. Very cool. Very cool indeed. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not equipped to go too deep into math, but perhaps I'm equipped to go into philosophy and some science. All right, so let's deal with the Reddit stuff second. It looks like we've got replies here. Good summary of the global workspace, and then a response. You did a really good job. Thank you. I think that the hard problem advocates have done significant damage to consciousness theory, as it seems to give a pass to paranormal consciousness by default. This is actually the second time someone's made this type of claim, and I think it's a controversial claim. So I'm gonna be I'm gonna chill out on this one. But I think it's worth exploring. I'm curious if people have done this type of thing. Basically, the claim that the introduction of this logical hard problem may have slowed down either our progress towards consciousness, which I guess I would be less open to. It's more that it's opened the door for a lot of non-physicalist theories to take hold especially using that argument of appeal to ignorance, which is a logical fallacy we're going to have to look through in part 2 of the doc. Asserts a claim is true because there is no evidence to disprove it, or that a claim is false because there is no evidence to support it. So a lot of times it's, hey, physical science hasn't closed the hard problem gap, so therefore it can't be closed. Yeah, so that's obviously a tricky thing to hold. I kind of make the case in this video that science tells us that we can't close the hard problem gap in the way that a lot of people want to. Like it's like literally impossible to create a description that captures the experience, and I think that's what people are ultimately looking for. But I think as we slowly get a more comprehensive conceptualization of what's going on with the brain and how that affects our experience, then we will be less open to considering that some extra thing is happening. In my interpretation, the commentator is saying paranormal consciousness is actually, how do I know prima? Is it prima facie?
Prima facie.
Prima facie, based on first impression, accepted as correct until proved otherwise. Ridiculous. But my video does not allow. My video explains that that we're not. Well, like literally, I think your wording is great. It's like what we discuss in the video doesn't allow it. Like we're like knowing what we know, we're not allowed to hold that type of view. Yeah, it's possible. That's the other thing we say. It's very possible that, you know, there's some external thing that that is unaccounted for that affects our consciousness in some way. I kind of make the argument that even if there is something that's external, like we know enough about the neural correlates of consciousness to know that it must not affect a significant portion of our experience. Yo, Onion Helmet, what's good? It seems bro got cooked. Who got cooked? Who's cooking? Pasted. Okay, and then we got a second comment here, which was great. Was there no response to this one? What was the second thing here? Oh, people are still responding to the previous video because it was so big. All right. Yeah, we have to we need to still market more on this video. The r/consciousness stuff did get some discussion going, but I don't think it's getting a lot of views. Like, this is one of those. Oh yeah, 4 upvotes, 58 comments. Onion Helmet. There's a ton of comments here of people that just didn't watch. Like it's quite obvious. Now and then there's also comments where this is a learning experience for me. The fact that I have a recap of the previous video kind of sets me up for failure in a place like this, where they hear the stuff that I said in the previous, or like I start off with the conclusions of the previous video. They take that and then they're already upset, like they're not watching farther, which is so be it. But good discussion in here, and actually I do want to cover some of this discussion. Yeah, perhaps they do see the long timing. In my mind, we needed all the information there. Coffee, no. What chamomile tea. Yeah. Going for the zero caffeine. 99% of Redditors read the headlines and form their opinions based on that. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, even the person that actually, there's a really nice comment that I want to go through, and he said he skimmed it, or he skimmed the text version of the post. So I included the transcript post here on the Substack post. So yeah, this is the whole script. And so, yeah, I think after even that, I don't think you got the takeaways from the video. So I think people were just kind of looking to see if it meshes with, you know, what they're usually hearing. But no worries. Let's actually get rid of these and just start from the top here. Let's try to go through them. So this was a mess up. This was another mess up that I made. I put a neuroscientific approach. Bad idea. I should have done a pragmatic approach, which is what I actually have for the video now.
Let's build a...
I think that makes much more sense. Like, that's what's actually happening in the video. So, yeah. Then... yeah, and then I think we're good. I think all this was fine. I think this is what I need. Perhaps I could have gone farther in depth into the type of argument I'm trying to make here, just because everyone's going to be so primed. But yeah, like right off the bat, but neuroscience does not have the tools at this point to understand the role of the brain in subjective experience. So, oh, we got an edit. To be clear, I'm saying that you can't model a process that you can't measure directly unless you have one or more variables that are believed to be statistically associated with it. At this point, we have no such variable for subjective experience, so there's no input for a model. Yeah, I don't know if that holds up. I think the idea of neural correlates is we can leverage report. We can leverage that type of empirical data. But we've got some people kind of discussing on each other. So this is actually pretty interesting. We can and do model processes that we can't measure directly. Consider dark matter, blah, blah, blah. Subjective experience is subject to modeling just like anything else that affects the universe. And ultimately, there are no direct measurements. So I pushed back on this using what we talked about in the video. But what do we have here? Consider dark matter. In the case of dark matter, which is still hypothetical at this point, we can measure gravitational effects that we believe to be correlated with dark matter. We use these effects to construct models of how dark matter could work, but ultimately it's all hypothetical unless we get some direct measures of dark matter, which in theory we could obtain at some point. In the case of subjective experience, there is currently no measure of brain activity or behavior that can serve as input to a convincing model of consciousness in the brain, because brain activity reflects both conscious and unconscious processes. And because people can't report on their own subjective experience as it happens without contaminating it. Whoa. So yeah, I think I disagree on both accounts. I think, I do agree that there's some contamination. This is the whole idea that everything that we experience, everything we understand, everything we report is through some interpretive lens. But I don't think that like disqualifies the report. Like what we're allowed to survey people, like that's within the rules of empirical science. Should I respond to him? You don't have to respond to him. I think it would be more helpful to just put an upvote so that more people come in here. But I'm not brigading or anything. Brigading with our team of a few. The main thing I would push back on is this first part, which is because brain activity reflects both conscious and unconscious processing. The whole point of the lesion studies is that we could see when exactly some change in the brain eliminates consciousness. So, say less. Thank you very much. The most recent cutting-edge papers on modeling the relationship between brain activity and consciousness use visual stimuli to drive brain activity related to a visual perception, and then attempt to interpret the observed brain activity in terms of a vague mechanistic model of consciousness in the brain. In this work, there has been no convincing attempt to parse brain activity related to unconscious processes from brain activity related to conscious processes. And there has been no attempt to model spontaneous subjective experiences that aren't driven by the onset of a proximal stimulus. You can't put a person in a sensory deprivation tank for an hour and they will have dozens, if not hundreds, of subjective experiences. We have absolutely no idea what role the brain plays in those experiences. I think this guy's just wrong in all accounts. To put it very kindly, we have a long, long way to go before we are anywhere near understanding the role of the brain in subjective experience. Unless your experiences have no effect on the universe, they can be observed and measured. Not being able to yet do so very well is a different issue. However, we are developing tools where we can trigger experiences using techniques like optogenic manipulation. There may be a long way to go, but there are no fundamental obstacles. Okay. I don't know if I should respond to like these types of posts. If I were to respond, it would be something like, I think you might be behind, but I'm not super certain. I think I'm pretty certain on that one, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. I'm a Harvard. They put some effort into the post. At least. Yeah, that is true. I do appreciate whenever they put a lot of effort into a post. And this is small compared to some of the ones down the line. I do like just upvoting all of these. I don't know if that helps us out as a post or not. Yo, Peter Introvert, what's good? Let's go feedback. We got feedback. For me, the tie. I'm a Harvard-trained neuroscientist, and you're wrong. Refuse to elaborate. Short but very low. Yep. $20 row, and you could make this the top post of all time on the subreddit. Is that how that works? You could just pay for upvotes? You just bought it? If subjective experience is totally inaccessible, and this is responding to the first post as well, how does your brain detect and measure it well enough to send signals to your tongue to make you say, I have subjective experience? Does your physical brain, which is look at this, use of bold, which is a physical object in the physical world, cause the physical process of saying I have subjective experience for reasons entirely unrelated to said subjective experience? With all due respect, this is madness, utter madness. This is great. Once we have explained the processes that cause people to say I have subjective experience, we have explained that which people call consciousness. There is no reason to suspect this falls outside the realm of neuroscience. Of course, if you ascribe magical properties to the information processing inside our heads, then it seems like an unsolvable mystery, because it is, because magic doesn't exist. But then again, I think that there's an issue that's unsolvable, not because magic doesn't exist, but because of the nature of the problem that we're trying to solve. But then again, why would you do that when you could much rather explain the processes that cause you to ascribe said properties to the brain? That's great. Exactly. I've been making this point for years. If you can fully explain what neural activity is causing subjective conscious reports, you've solved the hard problem, or rather dissolved the hard problem. The issue is that this can only be studied in humans, and neuroscience is notoriously bad at studying neural causation in humans. We can do it in mice to an extent, but mice can't make subjective conscious reports. If you're a naughty boy, can you buy upvote? Have you gone over recent advances in speech, brain, computer interfaces yet? No, I haven't. That stuff, I do have to say that stuff is pretty interesting. That said, generally this channel tries to stay in a practical nature, or like a practical direction, and we've really kind of strayed from the path with all this consciousness stuff. I kind of got stun locked for the past month, and we have to get back on the practical stuff. Granted, the ontological takeaways of this video are highly practical in my mind. Like it sets the stage for what we're dealing with. It's kind of a lot of the takeaways that we have in part 1 of the Samrichten document. But yeah. A lot of interesting stuff around this. Do you for me the tie, do you? Uh-oh, Stream Elements got him. Oh no, what was it? It was oh, I see. It's a oh, I saw you. It was an attempt to get around it. All right. We've got a .org. Nice. Inner speech in motor cortex. Get out of here. Motor cortex and implications for speech neuroprosthesis. Very nice. Okay, attempted inner and perceived speech has have a shared representation in motor cortex. That's cool. And inner speech BCI decodes general sentences with improved user experience. Aspects of private inner speech can be decoded during cognitive tasks like counting. High fidelity solutions can prevent a speech BCI from decoding private inner speech. Speech brain computer interfaces show promise in restoring communication to people with paralysis, but have also prompted discussions regarding their potential to decode private inner speech, which is kind of scary. Separately, inner speech may be a way to bypass the current approach of requiring speech BCI users to physically attempt speech, which is fatiguing and can slow communication. Using multi-unit recordings from 4 participants, we found that inner speech is robustly presented in the motor cortex and that imagined sentences can be decoded in real time. And this is insane. The representation of inner speech was highly correlated with attempted speech, though we also identified a neural motor intent dimension that differentiates the two. We investigated the possibility of decoding private inner speech and found that some aspects of free-form inner speech could be decoded during sequence recall and counting tasks. Finally, we demonstrate high-fidelity strategies that prevent speech BCIs from unintentionally decoding private inner speech. Very cool. Yeah, that is awesome. And this is 2025. Is this published, or is this a preprint of some sort? This kind of seems published. Open access. What is that? Just means we have access to it. But yeah, article in is it called Leading Edge? Or is it called Cell? It's published in Cell. Very nice. We gotta get like a journal subscription or something where we can just see these cutting edge reports. But something like that, just in my mind, is such a compelling like neural correlate where I don't know, it just kind of builds this picture of how, I mean, especially the geometric stuff that I talk about at the end of the video, how we're like mapping specific types of thoughts to a geometric space within the brain. Like, it just seems like things are going in a way where it's like we're probably going to figure out exactly what's going on in the brain whenever we're having very specific thoughts. And granted, it might be difficult to figure out like what prompts certain thoughts, like when you are in a sensory deprivation tank, but we know what currently we know what parts of the brain are involved, so we kind of just have to follow we got to keep finding these patterns and follow where they take us. Peter Introvert, in video there is a lot of cases for body-mind connection, but it's not about solving hard problem. Right. It depends what we mean by solving the hard. I kind of went with like a clickbaity title by saying solving the hard problem, but in my sense, we're pragmatically solving the the hard problem by pointing out that the hard problem, the notion, I think my conclusion is the notion of a hard problem is something that we might want to revisit from time to time and consider whether or not we still feel it's like a hard problem, but it's not something to get hung up on. So I point out that I think what people are looking for in terms of the hard problem, I think science tells us it's impossible to actually provide that. Like that's just not, it's not something that's possible within the very constraints of what we're dealing with, which is how could we possibly, it's the same, I mean, I say this all in the video, it's the same idea of how can we possibly capture experience in words. Like it's just not something we can do. I think this is something that religion and philosophy have figured out for a long time now, and now, as I said, we have a good mechanistic explanation for why we would not be able to do that. It's literal mind reading. Yeah, that is crazy. I think this is misleading. In the sense commonly understood, it's published in Cell. Yep, and this isn't consciousness per se, but inner speech is a big part of consciousness, conscious experience. Right. I think, yeah, the point that I try to make in the video is that when people think about consciousness, they're thinking of this very holistic experience. But as we could start to hammer down where different aspects of that experience are coming from and how they contribute to to their own information transfer and yeah, I think this just gives us a better sense of how grounded all this stuff is and how yeah, I mean, it makes sense of the lesion studies as well, when people have damage to certain parts of their brain and then they have a very different experience that they can identify. You know, we take for granted the full aspect of our conscious experience in every moment, but we can't fathom what it would be like if we were to lose that part of our brain or that part of our conscious experience. Like, it's not possible to fathom it. You know, we could argue that it's difficult to empathize with humans, other humans. Like, people have trouble empathizing with other humans. How are we supposed to empathize with like you know, animals or like humans that have had significant damage to their brains, such that their conscious experience is different than the vast majority of other humans. So it's just very, very difficult stuff to intuit. Wikipedia was just a dream. Maybe later. Oh no. that's how they get you. All right, is a Latin phrase which means it is solved by walking, referring to an anecdotal practical solution to a seemingly complex philosophical problem. It is often attributed to St. Augustine in a refutation of Zeno's paradoxes of motion. Okay. Zeno's paradoxes state that if one were to examine individual moments of an object moving in a given direction, as with an arrow flying towards its target or overtaking a second slower object, as the Achilles challenging a tortoise to a race, one would not actually be able to find a moment of the act of change or motion taking place, thus proving Zeno's view of motion as illusory and impossible. Okay. I don't quite understand where this is taking us. The individual, is this like if you were to take literal cat, like you take a picture and you see that it's not moving? And I'm also curious what is solved by walking. Oh, okay. Yep. Imagine someone walking towards a wall It gives the origin, basically a meme from antiquity. That's actually pretty funny to think about. I'm already in asynchronistic mode and I'm going to sleep. I will respond later on Discord or in comments. Yes, I get that it's actually a clickbait. Fair enough. I'll check it out once you post it up in there. Yeah, I do feel like it is a very odd argument that I make. And I don't think it's not like a novel argument, like we're pulling from so many different things. But it's not like it's not a common argument, I think, that we see. I'm not sure if you stated in explicit way that you just not going to solve it. In the video, I do. I say science suggests that this would be impossible. Verbatim. Imagine someone is walking towards a wall. They walk half the distance, then half the rest. Then they walk half the second distance and half that. This can go on forever. Thus, Zeno proves motion doesn't truly exist. I've got a good real world example of that. Being pragmatic is a good thing. I agree. Of course, until Diogenes the Cynic, in an account of Simplicius of Cilicia, of a debate against Zeno, upon hearing his opponent's argument, Diogenes silently rose and walked away, thus implying the reality of motion to be so self-evident that any attempt to debate it is meaningless. Right? I think that's a good example where it's like, okay, what is the pragmatic point here? Like what, or the practical point, you know? Like what are we trying to get at here? Like if we mean motion in such a way that you can point out it doesn't exist, then maybe that's not what we should mean by motion. Maybe we should think of something else as motion, which might be something that we can just simply identify visually. Not everything has to be like a logical puzzle. Like I think that everyone kind of fits something into some logical puzzle where then they can leverage semantics to like get to some crazy point or some crazy idea. And, you know, at some point you just have to ask, like, what are we doing here? What's going on? The NYT, New York Times, had a great obituary for a socialist philosopher who died in the early 2000s, and they gave a great anecdote. So this deceased philosopher was at a seminar and listening to another scholar muse that if a double negative is positive, why isn't a double positive negative? Our deceased philosopher shouted out, "Yeah, right," settling the point. Very nice. He was being ironic, of course. Yep, that's a pretty good one. Yeah, to take the pragmatic linguistic stance, a double negative would not just merely equal a positive, or it wouldn't cancel out. Like using a double negative would cause people to infer something else than if you were to just simply use a positive, or if you were to, I don't know, say it differently. Like words just have meaning. Like the words don't just have meaning. Words just are inferred, or communication of any sort is inferred, and using different phrases is going to elicit different inferences. Slightly different, practically probably the same, or practically similar. This is like a similar example is like, you know, the generation that's just like, why do people need to use curse words? And the reality is curse words do supply something. Maybe it's emphasis. Maybe it's just it's like a social what's the word people use? It's just like a social identification type thing where it's like, hey, I'm this way. I'm such that I can use a curse word, you know. Fadic, pure sentiment. What does fadic mean? Denoting or relating to language used for general purposes of social interaction. Right. And it's probably a mix of both. Like, it's probably like a little emphasis. Like, it does leverage some emphasis, and then some of it is just the pure sentiment. Okay, if subjective experience is totally inaccessible, how does your brain detect and measure it well enough to send signals to your tongue to make it... Okay, this is a response to that other. We don't know what causal role the brain plays in subjective experience. I don't remember this one is from what it's worth. For what it's worth. I didn't say that subjective experience is inaccessible. I said that it is inaccessible to everyone except the individual having the experience. You can study your own subjective experience very effectively, but at this point, neuroscience does not have the tools to study a person's subjective experience from the outside. I think that's the point of the neural correlates. That's why the PCI is kind of nice, because regardless of whether you can report, I can check whether or not you're conscious or not to a decent degree. So, okay. What do we want to do? Oh no, have I looked at this one? The so-called hard problem of consciousness, as articulated by Chalmers and others, arises from an implicit categorical error, the attempt to define consciousness as if it were an object within reality, rather than the condition through which reality becomes knowable. That's pretty astute. It's like it's the difficulty that Heidegger has of finding the meaning of capital B being, or was it finding the... I forget. There was some like recursive thing that he attempts to do, and he wasn't able to actually do it. He wasn't able to achieve that within his lifetime, or within at least the time he was working on being in time. It's like it's not a coherent thing to try to do. So this is quite astute, I think. Consciousness can be explained in terms of what is, because it is not it cannot be explained in terms of what it is, because it is not something in the same ontological sense that phenomena, objects, or thoughts are. It can only be known through what it does. It observes, it becomes aware. Observation and awareness are not actions performed by someone else. They're the foundational activities that make all other actions possible. To speak of consciousness as having properties is therefore to misframe it. The only property of consciousness is that it is aware. So this is like similar to that Cartesian, the only thing we can be 100% certain of is that we're conscious. So it's like, I still think it's making like, perhaps it's not aware that it's making that type of... it's not even a fault, because it's not like this person's like grounding an entire metaphysical theory of consciousness on top of this. But in fact, what Heidegger does is actually come up with very abstract properties of consciousness as well. Like, you know, he points out how being is disclosed, how you know, he comes up with these existentialia, these characteristics of Dasein, as he calls it, like the being with others, being towards death. Like, all of these things are things that are describing, these are properties that describe our conscious experience most abstractly. Right, I think therefore I am. Yep. So it's something we can do. Of course, you know, as Heidegger said, it's all interpretation. This whole idea that we are aware, that's interpretation. It does not exist in space or in time. Space and time appear within it as conditions of perception. So that's similarly apt, where all this stuff is being disclosed or manifesting within consciousness. Consciousness has no shape, no form, no origin, no destination. right? To once again, like to even say that consciousness has no shape is giving it some property. Like these are properties of consciousness that the person is just making. It cannot be perceived because it is the perceiver itself. Every attempt to locate or explain consciousness in physical, biological, and computational terms collapses into circular reasoning because explanation itself presupposes consciousness. To define it objectively is to assume that the very capacity it would supposedly arise from. This is why consciousness remains impenetrable to all analytic reduction. It cannot be contained within any frame of reference because it is the field in which all frames are of reference arise. So yeah, I'm really liking this this framing. In this sense, the hard problem is not a problem of complexity, but of perspective. Consciousness cannot be known as an object because it is the subject of knowing. The scientist who and what subject of knowing, like in very much the nature of the thing perceiving, rather than like a subject that's been objectified. The scientist who studies consciousness is, in truth, consciousness studying itself through the medium or of form, an infinite recursion that can never close upon itself. Right, this recursive nature of awareness, consciousness observing its own manifestations, suggests a self-generating dynamism. Consciousness is pure awareness, but awareness inherently implies a relation. To be aware, something must be distinguished from something else. Thus, consciousness pushes itself outward into contrast, into different. This is a Hegelian. Into differentiation, into form, to know itself, existence in this view. Is consciousness perceiving its own reflection? So this is kind of what we do when we try to make sense of the contents of our experience and the contents of our understanding in the document. We look to make sense of concepts as related to other concepts, and these are relations of both contrast or exclusion and implication, which you could just view through exclusion. Existence in this view is consciousness perceiving its own reflection. This pushing outward is not a movement in space, but a creative act of distinction, the emergence of duality from unity. The observer and the observed are two poles of a single process, continuously folding into and out of one another. Through this perpetual act of self-reflection, consciousness gives rise to experience, perception, and the multiplicity of worlds. Hence, the hard problem is not to explain how matter produces consciousness, but to recognize that matter itself is a manifestation within consciousness. So this could go into the analytic idealism route, though. That's the other issue, and so this is where we have to be very careful pragmatically, because I wouldn't push this type of speaking. To recognize that matter itself is a manifestation within consciousness. I think we need to be a little more precise. The concept of matter, like us thinking about matter right now, the concept that's in our minds, the thing that we think that we understand, that is certainly a manifestation within consciousness, but it's a manifestation of something. And the other thing that I push, which creates a really weird tension, is that it's not of something that's objective, that's external from us. It's a quality of the experience we have of the concept itself. The thing that we're experiencing, the concept in our brain feels objective. It feels true. And that's caused by our learning and whatnot. We're conditioned to think that when we see a pen, that it is real, that it like I get the feeling that this is actually a pen. And that was conditioned throughout my life of learning what a pen is and seeing other people think that's a pen, and etc. So the question is, okay, if our understanding of the physical world is simply just some thought that we have in our mind, then why privilege it? And I mean, I guess there's a bunch of reasons. Like, one is given our understanding of the physical world, which you at this point you might still believe is just the the thing in our heads. Well, the physical world makes sense of evolution, and it makes sense of the evolution of culture as well. Like it's a constraint that people deal with that affects the trajectory of what they think, what they believe. This is why we arrive at very high resolution concepts about the physical world. It's yo, Daniel N, what's good? It's because the physical world is actually quite important for survival. So yeah, we can see that even though my understanding of the physical world is a concept that's happening in my head, like it makes sense that the physical world would still be something that is physically like external to my body, like that. But it's not that like the concepts I'm experiencing are actually of that objective or that of that physical world, as if the physical world was the ruler of objective truth. It's just that my understanding of the physical world is such that the physical world was actually a key constraint that affected the trajectory of understanding and of people's cultural norms, such that I would end up having this understanding of the physical world. Now, once again, my understanding of the physical world is an understanding that feels objective, but that doesn't mean it's not like I'm experiencing the physical world directly, as I always say. All right, Onion Helmet. Tell me, Wittgenstein's asked a friend, why do people always say it was natural for man to assume that the sun went round the earth rather than that the earth was rotating? His friend replied, well, obviously, because it just looks as though the sun is going around the earth. Wittgenstein replied, well, what would it have looked like if it had looked as though the earth was rotating? Interesting. Right. I think that's just, it points out a bias, perhaps that's like perhaps that bias helps us out in most cases. The part of our brain that, makes us like come up with the most obvious thing to us is effective. Perhaps it's not only a bias, but it's just like, what we believe is possible is very much contingent, similar to our understanding of things in the moment. Like our understanding is very much about possibility. So if nothing has even told us that we could be even possible, that something could be possible, then we're not going to think about that being possible. It's like it's not even a possibility we've ever entertained before. Stanager the Manager, very nice. That's a new one for sure. To say matter is a manifestation within consciousness introduces the problem of how several different minds can manifest the same matter. Say an apple on a table at the same time, right? Now, granted, the concept, or like the understanding or the concept that an apple is in front of me is still an internal thing that's happening. It's like everyone's understanding of what's going on right now is unique to each person, but it's pragmatically similar, such that they would all agree that it's an apple, and they would all agree on the shape, and they would all agree on the color, etc. But they each have a different understanding of what an apple is, or whether or not they're hungry. So they might feel like, they might have some like more of a drive to want the apple. Someone who just ate is going to look at that apple and perhaps not be that interested. Whereas if someone on the other side of the table was very hungry, they would see that apple and they would be thinking, do the other people want the apple? I might want the apple. So yeah, this is like the really weird part. It's like they're all still dealing with some internal concept of what's happening right now. Like this is all just manifesting in their conscious experience, and that experience is meaningfully different, but it's pragmatically similar enough such that if you were to ask them, hey, what is on the table, they would all tell you apple. And that's why we can think, or that's not why, but that's like, that helps us think of how meaning itself is quite normative. It's like, if you see this object and someone asks you what it is, you ought to say it's a pen. Like, and it's not that like I intentionally think I want to follow the rules. It's like, that's just kind of a way that we can make sense of how our brain works in identification. It's not just that pen is, that this is objectively, like absolutely objectively a pen, and dictated by some external absolute truth, but this is just, I've been conditioned to see this as a pen, and my conditioning is such that I understand that other people know that this is a pen. Like it makes sense that this is a pen. Now, once again, or not once again, but the thing that we haven't spoke about, that we haven't really spoke about at all within this whole consciousness discussion, is predictive processing and the idea of prediction error, which leads us to the emotions that we experience when things don't go the way that we expect it to, and that drives learning, and it also drives negative emotion, and we don't like that. So that seems to make the problem more complicated, though, in the way that saying the universe revolves around the Earth introduces more complexity than heliocentrism. It does make it makes the explanation more complicated, but it's the necessary precision. Like, it's the precision that is necessary to explain what's actually happening here. I'm not a fan of idealism, but I don't think that is a slight I'm not a fan of idealism, but I think that is a slight misinterpretation, saying different minds there. I think they believe consciousness is universal and fundamental, shared by all. Yeah, perhaps I haven't figured out the best way to describe or to explain this, like this view that I'm pointing out there, but it's not like this is like my philosophy, or this is like the view that I've been cooking up, and I'm just trying to push it on people. It's like, this is like, basically what happened is I took physical science, empirical science. I took that seriously, and I also took seriously what people like Hegel, Brandom, Heidegger, what they were doing in pointing out the personal embodied nature of meaning or ontology. And together, those things point me towards thinking that every single person has a slightly different understanding, given the fact that their brain is slightly different, like their connections are different. There's a lot of things that are different about people that contribute to how they experience the world. A lot of that's nature and nurture. And so the question is, like, then how do we make sense of shared meaning? And so this is why we went into this in the document here. So perhaps we could read through. That's only my interpretation of what they're saying, so take it with a grain of salt, of course. There are some great, thoughtful responses on Reddit. Gotta say, I'm impressed. Yeah, I thought that the Reddit showing was pretty great, and I might actually I could I'm gonna probably look through this tomorrow morning and give responses to a lot of these. But yeah, this is a lot of good stuff. I love this stuff. A lot of people were looking out for the ants here. This person got as far as to regulate life and survival, and unfortunately that was it. Oh my gosh, so much discussion. Hell yeah. Right. This is a good point. Okay, so I was pretty much saying like in response to all life forms are conscious since they are life, and I pointed out that we do have to draw a line somewhere if we want to make our use of the word consciousness meaningful, like such that people understand what we're trying to say, and then this person pointed out his definition of consciousness, which is a valid definition. I like this definition, but it's also their definition. So I know you implied it's your opinion, but is there any reading that supports those traits? And so the question is, what do we mean by consciousness? Which is why Damasio talks about the development of consciousness over time, and he points out like he has his own levels of consciousness. Like he imagines that at some point, it's not even imagining. He can point to, okay, at some point they had, like, these species just had this level of consciousness, or our ancestors just had like they were able to do this. This is all that the neuroscience, that like the architecture that they had allows us to say about the type of stuff that they could do. But then as this became more complex, you get to do more stuff. I do love ants. Ants and beavers literally shape our world. Development of consciousness over time in the individual. Oh, development of consciousness. So yeah. Yeah, and that's the premise of the previous video, the one I referenced in the beginning there. So I kind of do a very short version of that development, but I would highly recommend reading The Strange Order of Things. It was a ton of fun. Like, I really enjoyed this book, and it's the reason why we got Stunlocked into consciousness, unfortunately. Also, Alex O'Connor's the reason we got Stunlocked, but... Alright, and then... Alright, so we can skip past this. Why ants catching strays? I enjoyed that one. I let them in the house once in a while for a good feed. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, we got more defenders. Ants have also done fine without fins. Doesn't mean that fins wouldn't be evolutionarily viable for a fish. You know what? That's phenomenal. Just very simple logic. Phenomenal logic. Also, bigger brains did not lead to better foraging. The linked article specifically measures efficiency. Okay, so wow, this person's going after the evidence too. Wow. The op made an assertion that consciousness regulates life/survival. I am trying to understand this since, based on other species, this comes across as working backwards for justification. For all animals, the idea is that the trajectory of all species, it was in some sense driven by homeostasis. Just developments for that. The question is, or the issue is, or the thing to look at with evolution is, what is the species currently and what are the selective pressures? And then homeostasis is operating under the hood. And so this is why different species go in different directions. Why an ant wouldn't get a fin, even though ants are operating towards this imperative of homeostasis or allostasis. They're working to regulate life and to flourish. Like it's always like a, there's always like a upwards movement that our biology seems to push towards. And so, like, this makes sense of how we could arrive at, like, predictive processing, where we can look into the future and consider what will be. And I put out in the video that predictive processing isn't just, things that we see. It's like our body our nervous system predicts the state of our internals as well. I don't recall Opp asserting that consciousness regulates life and survival, merely suggesting it as a plausible explanation for its evolutionary value. I don't understand how the comparison to ants refutes this possibility. Man, we got some defenders out here. The video explores some early evidence for this view, but considering the early state of neurology currently, we can only really approach the problem backwards, as a forward focus would require more base evidence that no one has yet. The video is more of a proof of concept. Then think of bacteria, the most successful species on the planet. Sure, if you take our subjective experience and try to retrofit neurology into it, then backwards is the only possible route. We have plenty of evidence that the answers lie somewhere elsewhere. Oh, we have evidence. If reality is contextual, part 2. Okay. Oh, no. All right, I don't think I'm going to read this one, but name me something the most successful species on the planet without any metric is entirely nonsense. True, that's the thing. It's like, if we're going to give out evolution awards, which we should do, that's actually a really fun topic that we should do for one of our evolution months. No one had that post lamenting it. Yeah, I didn't want to go into that, but he was upset that no one gave it much love. Which I think is kind of par for the course for this subreddit, honestly. I don't want to like be I don't want to cope too hard. I don't want to pre-cope on this one, even though I'm actually pretty stoked about the response, just because really I am looking for this discussion. I'm looking just for interaction and people to talk through the ideas, make sure I'm not going insane. I forget where I was going with that. Yeah, I've lost it. To that point, the high... Oh, yeah, that's what I was talking about. Thank you, Filcher. Thank you. Yeah, we should have the awards where we do make stupid claims like this. But, yeah, it's like, what is the value that we're looking for a most successful species on the planet? As I pointed out, like, bacteria are probably doing better than humans in terms of their capacity to survive over time. So, who's winning? I don't know. But why we have to assert some metric. To that point, the hyoid bone was a significant divergent quality of our species from earlier hominids and certainly influenced how our consciousness evolved as a singular species later. Interesting. Like perhaps that's the other thing. That's the other part of this story. To say that homeostasis is the only directive of evolution is like fundamentally inappropriate. Like evolution is a process of we point this out in the document, it's of adaptations, exaptations. So sometimes you just have like byproducts of other adaptations that now just start taking on new function, and then you just have byproducts. You just have random movement, and things just develop over time as things are just carried along when other adaptations are being effective. And of course, adaptations, exaptations, byproducts, these are all things that we retrospectively like interpret. Like we're putting a lens, we're trying to make sense of like some abstraction. But really at the base, we're talking about a bunch of genes, we're talking about proteins, etc. So yeah, homeostasis is just a very broad underlying concept that allows us to make sense of not only our current mechanisms, like literally what's happening in different parts of our body and the brain. But it also helps us make sense of the trajectory of consciousness in a very intuitive way. Computer science degree. Bro should have lied or something for the attention. Was that what he said in the thing? Because now I feel bad. I gotta defend my computer science brethren. We could talk thanks to the hyoid bone. Awesome. So yeah, what type of communication were pre-hyoid bone species using? Was it just grunts? Because that's kind of insane to like that development. All right. So this was okay. This is actually a really great string, but this is also funny where it's I gave your Substack a cursory, though admittedly not thorough read, and I have a few points, and then we don't have to go through all these points. I don't even think I read all these points because this is a lot of stuff. I probably should read these points though. I did give a response though. Let's go through. Okay, so however, as we discussed in the previous video, we have strong neural correlates for these exact experiences. Right, idealist and panpsychist philosophers not only acknowledge and account for those neural correlates, but even argue that their respective theories do a better job of explaining them. So it's not so like analytic idealism does make sense of these types of experiences. It makes sense of the physical world and all that. So yeah, the question is, you know, where do you go from there? Yeah, you have to be somewhat bought into this idea that the physical world is something that exists outside of just our mind. Like we're not creating the physical world in some physical sense. Like what it's even though all the meaning we know comes from in the mind, it seems that like my concept of the physical world is such that it seems logical and compelling to me that the physical world would exist outside of my thoughts. Like exist in whatever that might mean. Not exist in the way that we think about things, but exist in the sense that it's something that just sits there and affected the trajectory of human development. I was there when the hyoid bone arrived. We were singing opera all the time before. Nice. What happened? You can't sing like that anymore? So it is not clear to me at all why you think the existence of neural correlates alone is sufficient evidence for physicalism. I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of stuff that points towards physicalism, but you're going to need more than that. In other words, actual arguments and evidence for why you think those other theories are wrong. So I pointed out that we actually went into like non-physicalist theories more in depth, I think, in the previous video. In this one, I do think that we make a good case, provided you're okay with the presuppositions of the rigor and standards of empirical science. I think then, like, what happens is, yeah, you arrive, like, yeah, what's the way to go? If you just blindly follow empirical science, then you arrive at the physical world, and then the physical world actually points to how our own personal ontologies, the meaning that manifests for us, is individual. Like that's what the empirical science implies about each of our conscious experiences. And then the question is, okay, then how do we like make sense of this paradox? And you have to just rely on some presupposition like empirical science, or just you have to rely on presuppositions that we just kind of find ourselves with in each moment. The fact that I understand that I am someone that can think and stuff like that. I can consider a physicalist approach, like the idea that physicalism is an option, the idea that physicalist interpretations are possible. Like these are all things that I'm just kind of, I've been given. These are all just presuppositions. Okay, I don't want to read through all this actually. But I think good discussion came out of it because I think we were able to clear up some of the air, and I'm curious where it ended up. I said I think you might appreciate everything starting at the explanatory gap section of this video, which I think is the strongest argument for this pragmatic approach. Points out that at the end of the day, we simply just abide by certain presupposed norms. The norms of empirical science and logic do not necessarily entail a physicalist framework, but they suggest that currently a physicalist framework is a more plausible explanation than a non-physicalist one because it makes sense of our experience, and most notably our experience of concrete meaning, rationality, etc. Just to be clear, I don't argue that the hard problem isn't real, which he had said that I was, and I would even reject that assertion. And using a lack of discovery as evidence is the appeal to ignorance fallacy. That isn't to say that it can't be a good reason for something, it's just that it can be fallacious. Given that science only really developed sophisticated tools such understanding in the past couple of 100 years, and since tech is about to pop off, I think we ought not assume that it won't affect our understanding of the physical world's role in consciousness. So this is a really interesting point that we get to. We must simply abide by the okay, but why should we presuppose your epistemological norms? And why are you allowed to use these presupposed norms to then completely invalidate other people's presupposed epistemological norms? So this is where I was pretty certain at this point that they hadn't read the whole entire thing, because we literally cover this topic. Even to suggest that the norms of empirical science is this uniform monolithic system is highly problematic. There's no clear consensus on what those norms even are, and they are also constantly changing and evolving. So I point out that is the right question to ask. I think a video on why we should, and once again, these are merely norms, not some absolute mandate, abide by these norms is worth making, and I thought it was too out of the scope for this video. And then I say when I say the norms and standards, I'm not referring to knowledge of the physical world per se, but rather the method of empirical science, which can be considered as what one ought to do or provide in order for us to believe that it is true, rather than what we ought to believe is true. Like that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the necessary, like the responsibility of truth. That's really what we're looking for. It's not like, I'm not trying to make the argument that like we ought to just agree that the physical world is a thing. It's we ought to agree that some framework ought to be defined by its evidence. And the physical world framework is currently quite defined by its ability to predict. Like that's the whole. It's kind of the whole benefit with of having that type of view, or that might be even the reason that we have that type of view, because it was useful over many years. But this is where we get more interesting. For example, see the image of objectivity by. So I do want to actually look into this. Maybe in Gemini, which gives a thorough historical account of how multiple contradictory understandings of the concept of objectivity arose and became dominant in the scientific community throughout the past few centuries. If you cannot solve this issue, your entire thesis collapses like a house of cards. So you really only have three options here. So I was pretty intrigued by this, because we now have three options. 1, arbitrarily pick a set of epistemological principles for no real fundamental reason, which is not exactly convincing. So this is not what we want to do. 2, bite the bullet and adopt a Rorty-style relativistic pragmatism, which would do away with objective truth altogether, though I doubt that this is congruent with the aim of your project. To me, this sounds great. I think this is what we're probably trying to do. I don't know Rorty well, but I know that Brandom was somewhat of a fan of Rorty, and I follow like a very Brandom style, or Brandomian style. So I'm guessing this is the way we want to go, like a pragmatist way. where we do get rid of, we want to get rid of objective, like capital T, objective truth altogether, except that there are in fact more fundamental epistemological truths than those of the scientific method, which the scientific project is itself ultimately rooted in. So yeah, we don't want to go this, like, once again, we don't want to point out, or we don't want to assert that like the physical world is like the root of our ontology. Like, it's not determining what is true as we experience it. It affects it significantly, you could argue, but it's not fundamentally what's affecting the meaning that we think about. Though you would need to explain that these fundamental epistemological principles are what they are, and then argue for them in a way that is compatible with your denial of the primacy of consciousness. This is another thing where I don't think they read through, but I am an advocate for the primacy of consciousness. So that's the difficulty of, putting these two things together. That I believe that the physical world exists separate from our conscious experience, and I agree that meaning comes from consciousness, or it manifests in consciousness. It's like meaning it's like a quality of experience. It's not something external, but because we pragmatically speak meaning or understand it in words, we write things down, etc., and what we say and what we write has significant effects on the world or on other people. We come to think that the meaning itself is some transcendent thing, but yeah, it's just pragmatic events playing themselves out. So then I say, I appreciate the recommendation. I think I'll explore it more thoroughly on stream later today. Just from my first view, I'm guessing I'll go with option 2. My understanding is significantly influenced by Robert Brandom, who I think is significantly influenced by Rorty. At the end of the day, I like to highlight that all we have is subjective experience and intuition. We are only left to use the contents of our experience to navigate these types of discussions, and we must value certain heuristics over others. So I can say that, so I'm not familiar with Robert Brandom, so I'm afraid I can't speak on that. I can say that this style of pragmatism is still defended by many philosophers, so it is definitely not an absurd position, though I wonder why you insist on adhering to physicalism in the first place, if that is your approach. The strongest motivation people generally seem to have for defending physicalism is that they see science as capital O, capital T, objective truth, and physicalism has the reputation of being the most science-y, so that is the one they defend. Though I should add that I vehemently disagree with the notion that physicalism is any more scientific or less metaphysical than its competitors, but that is besides the point here. Then I say, I wouldn't want to have an absurd position. I'm not even sure that my approach puts me in the label of physicalist, even though it sounds like it does. I really only make the case that we pragmatically ought to follow the standards and rigor of empirical science and logic, and these norms lead us to asserting that physicalism provides the most plausible view, as we currently understand it, and its alternatives. To be clear, I do not see science as a capital T, capital O, capital T objective truth, and I assault the idea of some notion of an external absolute objective truth. For me, objectivity is a quality of felt experience, leading people to believe that what they believe, even if brought to by the norms of empirical science, is absolutely true. I think your last parentheses might actually be where this discussion goes when you look deep enough. I make this case in the ontological takeaways section. Why ought we believe in the physicalist view if our certainty of it is similarly just a contingent speculative felt experience? This leads me to consider that we need some heuristic manifest in our experience. And then the next question, which I propose but I don't answer in the video, is why should we use the standards and norms of empirical science as that heuristic? I think I can make that argument, but it was just too out of scope for this video, and I really should spend time building that argument. Okay, Eric, what's good? I just left a fire comment on that video. Oh my gosh, we got a fire comment. Hell yeah, I appreciate it. Let us get it. We got to go to the source.
Let's build a
Oh. I think there's a bias in the scientific community towards conceiving all of reality the same way they would observe a natural process from the third person in an experiment. There really isn't a hard problem if you just think of the natural process, what's being viewed from the outside, as the same neural process being experienced from the inside. There's also an assumption that there is a particular essence of objects in the universe beyond its behavioral patterns or structure. That's a product of Western Aristotelian thinking, which is why some think to bridge the gap, experience itself can be a type of object, just like a fundamental block. Yeah, that was actually pretty similar to a comment that someone made that we looked at earlier in the night, where they were pointing out that, yeah, once you get in this idea that like consciousness is like an object that needs to be given properties that make it make sense in the way that you want it to, it's like you're dealing with this really odd scenario or dynamic where you're just never going to be able to do it. It's impossible. So thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, it's like the question is what do we want out of this discussion? And that's where we go in the video. But yeah, it's fun stuff. And I want to try to find someone that's kind of got a similar way of going about this as I'm going about this, because I just don't see it, and I think it's a certain level of nuance that I think would very much benefit this discussion. So, can you roast a precept of mine apropos this topic of objects and objectivity? All right, let me see what apropos means. To the purpose. Okay, it can mean appropriate or relevant or timely and pertinent. So, Frenchy, fancy French for about nice. Can you roast a precept of mine about this topic of objects and objectivity? Sure, let it rip. And sometimes used instead of speaking of. Very nice. I gotta try to remember these. There's so many random phrases that I keep learning and then forgetting because it's like not absolutely necessary for me to learn. Every potential nameable thing exists as either an object of the mind or an object of the senses. My friend is an object of the senses until my friend leaves the room. Then when she becomes an object of the mind. So I would argue that we know enough about neuroscience and the architecture of our brain to point out that once the thing becomes conscious, it's already been decoupled from the senses. Like the senses are giving, so to go to the workspace theory, like the senses are affording the different systems that are ultimately communicating with the global workspace. They're affording that knowledge, like or information. They are like the senses are affecting what does get broadcast to the global workspace. But there is a decoupling, like so I would argue that your friend is an object of the mind at all times, when you're seeing them in the room, when they leave the room. Like that's what's happening in the brain. Granted, once you're seeing them, you're like what's getting broadcast is like slightly different, right? But it's still like the same. It's the same experience. It's the same stage, if you will. I'm going to use that word from now on in random conversations. Yeah, you got to quiz me every once in a while. Maybe at Wendy's or something. I don't know if that'll work. Where is the object, brother? I just see atoms. Even that is dubious. That's the other thing. It's like, you know, I mean, I always say this. Like when I look at an object, like a pen, I don't see atoms. I don't see molecules. I see a pen. What's the distinction between thing and potentially nameable thing? Oh, I see. Every potentially nameable. So yeah, you could argue that like every single thing exists in some objective sense, but then I would say that what exists is just a bunch of possibilities that don't actually come to fruition. Like you could say that potential exists. Like we have the capacity to understand something, and perhaps that's many different things. It is many different things, but yeah, I don't know if that's like the best way we should go about this, to say that those possibilities exist somewhere external to us because they could happen to us. Like possibility and potential and stuff like that, like that's something that we can intuit. Like that's a concept we can make sense of, and we can make sense of our own orientation towards the future and our own orientation towards our experience in the moment, given that we are predictive processors, let's just say. But it's not like there's actually potential in the world. Like it's not like there's actually possibilities in the world. The only way you could find, like, we can make sense of possibilities in the world in such a way that it's like objective in the world is through quantum physics. But once again, we're really just interpreting a wave function at that point. And I'm pretty open to many worlds, so it's not even like potential or possibilities is still something that requires a reference frame to look to the branches that happen in the future. I mean, in any case, even the non many worlds view of like collapse, like it still requires a reference frame where you're looking towards the future and you're seeing that some electron's about to split, and then you're saying that it's possibly one up or down or whatever. But yeah, things just happen. Like this is the point of I mean, yeah, I guess this is usually the point of determinism. Of course, the type of quantum physics that has a collapse doesn't allow for determinism, but which is why I always say, which is why I like the many worlds. They exist nonetheless. If it isn't potentially nameable, it's not a thing. Now that's another interesting thing to say. Like I think there's a lot of things that exist in the world that aren't nameable, like in the sense that we could conceptualize them, but maybe that's not right. If we can conceptualize them, then they're nameable. So it depends what we mean by exist. And I'm really close to this idea that existence has to do with experience, and there's a lot of things that we experience that we don't put into words. That's where I'm going with that one. Like I think the reason why I go that direction is because of Heidegger and how his view was existential, like it was an existential phenomenology. It's talking about existence through the sense of how we experience the world. Not necessarily what we can conceptualize in the world. I think that's his whole point. Like the idea of readiness to hand. I don't know if there's anyone that actually cares about Heidegger or knows Heidegger stuff, but like he comes up with these ideas of things that aren't, so like imagine there's the thing that you're cognizant of or that you can put into words, but then there's the thing that is still like an entity that's still meaningful in some sense, but it's not capturing your like it's not like being articulated in your mind. Like when I take hold of this pen and I start using it, and I'm not even thinking about the pen, I'm just thinking about the words on the paper, but you could still argue that this pen has meaning in some sense. That's kind of what he does. He argues that the pen has taken on new meaning as it becomes embodied, as I like make it an extension of myself, and it affects the possibilities or the potential that is making up my experience or my very existence. All right. I agree with that definition. I take a thing to be something that exists too, hence the potentially nameable seems redundant. A implies smiley face and B implies C, imply A and B imply C. Was it all right, never mind. But oh, it's because you had the parenthesis and yeah, B you had the B in the parenthesis. Nice. A implies B and B implies C, imply A and B implies C, but not necessarily the converse. Sorry, that sunglasses. Yeah, very nice. That is a great emoji. Anyways, thank you for the roast. Absolutely. And none of these are even for the combative comments over here. None of this is supposed to be a roast. I even tried to say to like a couple people like, hey, I'm not trying to beef here. Like, I'm here for the conversation. I'm a nominalist, so to say a concept is a thing seems really strange to me, but perhaps that's because the definition of thing isn't shared. Yeah, I wouldn't die on any hill of like what a thing ought to be. You know, I feel like that discussion doesn't really like help us out. Like it's not practical. Well, people think of thing in very different ways, and there's nothing concrete and empirical to like, you know, really tie thing down to. It's the nice thing about thing is it is ambiguous. It allows us to match thing up to any type of abstraction we want to. I think that's the benefit of, or like maybe I could say that's the pragmatic utility of it in our language. Heidegger is what happens when you give Nietzsche to a German student right at the end of World War I. I mean, that might most literally be true. The Mogami abstract variable. Yeah, abstract variable, right. I like thing 1, but thing 2 is a little freaky. Me and the cat in the hat are gonna fire him soon. Very nice, Darvin. Eric, Alan Watts had a great example of imaging, or I'm guessing imagining our language as only verbs and no nouns. What is the it that is reigning? There is simply the reigning. Right. Yeah, no, I think that is it's an interesting way to think about these things. Like, yeah, that's the interesting thing about looking through, like, you know, I talk about meaning, and meaning is like it's like a noun, right? Or I mean, I guess meaning could also be a verb, but I think one of the things that's really cool about what Heidegger was talking about when he talks about being is he says being isn't like a noun, it's a verb. It's like things are being things to you. And that's like a huge difference. It's not like that, you know, a pen has static properties and that's what the pen is. Like what the pen is to me, it's taking on so much more than just its properties. I couldn't put into words what the pen is being to me right now. Quote me on that. That's deep, bro. Hell yeah. I mean, I think these are just these Eastern ideas are really where we end up. I think you just kind of have to end up there. I think the Western ideas lead you to the Eastern ideas, and I don't know if I could say vice versa, but yeah, but that's not to say that like there's like one that has priority or anything. I just think that there's benefits from all these different facets. Q Daft Punk around the world. Hell yeah. Keeps going on and on and on. All right, here we go. I really only make the case that pragmatically we ought to follow the standards, and these norms lead us to asserting that physicalism provides the most plausible view. Such a pragmatic approach may seem reasonable at first glance, and I understand why you adopt it. However, the issue is that the hard problem does not arise from a lack of data or experimentation. The problem is that it seems impossible to even find a hypothesis that is conceptually coherent. Oh my gosh, we got a novel here. in that regard, I agree. Like, if we're gonna, like, this is a pragmatic argument, really, about what we ought to, like, how we ought to talk about the hard problem, like what we ought to do in relation to the hard problem. And yeah, pretty much the argument is because solving the hard problem in the way that I think people want to solve it is actually impossible. Because of that, because it is actually impossible, we ought to talk about it in a different way. We ought to leverage this in a more forward-looking, practical way. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the philosophical side of this discussion, so forgive me if I am autism explaining something you already know, but I figure a quick rundown of the philosophical discussion might help you here. As you hinted, hard problem is fundamentally a conceptual problem because there seems to be an insurmountable conceptual gap between subjective conscious experience and objective physical existence. This conceptual insurmountability is mostly an issue for dualists because they insist that these are two separate substances. So this leads to the so-called interaction problem. In other words, how can these two substances interact if they have a fundamentally different metaphysical nature? Right? Right. In my mind, and I'm saying that both in the sense of like my opinion, but also in my mind, we're only dealing with the concept of the physical world and the concept of consciousness. So they interact in that way. So the question is like, how can we, in what way can I make those two things make sense in my own mind? And I think that the discussion that I have in the video makes sense of that in my mind. It makes sense of the fact that these very thoughts I'm having about the physical world is affected by the physical world. Not the thought of the physical world, but it's affected by the actual physical world, the actual physical makeup of my brain, which I believe is something that is, separate from my experience of the concept of it. So that's how I would square that circle. The solution to the interaction problem is actually quite simple. We just need to be the monists. We just need to be monists. In other words, only presuppose the existence of one substance, but the question is what substance? So I agree with this. Idealists say only the Cartesian cogitans? How do I pronounce this one now? We're not gonna get a no. Cogitans? That says J. Maybe it's both? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Say only the Cartesian John exists. There is only one universal mind. They then have the individuation problem. How does one singular mind separate itself into multiple distinct consciousnesses? Panpsychists subscribe to a sort of Russell-style neutral So, I really like this discussion that I'm having with this person. Tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to write something out for him, because I think they deserve that. I hope they don't give up on me, though. It's a whole 12 hours. Going to be using this word at Wendy's, too. Once again, good luck. With all this laid out, I hope that you see why physicalism is not inherently more plausible or scientific than any of these other theories. Yeah, you know what? I kind of make this error then, right? I'm trying to say that, I'm leveraging physicalism in this way of, perhaps in a way that's not apt. Like, I'm pointing out that the most plausible view of consciousness is one in which the physical world affects consciousness. But that isn't one in which we take the full baggage of physicalism, which might be to say that the physical world is the source of ontology. So perhaps that gets me in trouble, and perhaps that's something I should look out for. Do we actually have like a what is the physicalism? The philosophical view that everything that exists is physical or depends on physical properties. That's ambiguous. That's not precise enough. This means that all objects, events, and properties, including those that seem non-physical like thoughts or social structures, are ultimately physical or grounded in the physical world as described by physics. Yes and no. That's the problem about this. It's like, yes, like the thoughts that I'm having are a reflection of the activity that's happening. They are the activity that's happening, right? But the tricky part with that is that this means that all objects, events, and properties, including those that seem non-physical like thoughts, are ultimately physical or but the thoughts themselves, like the experience of the thoughts, the experience themselves is not the physical world in like the same way that we're trying to just say, like it is the physical world, but for us, like the way that like subjectively we're able to experience or make sense of this thing, we wouldn't say that that's the physical world. It's like experiential, it's conceptual. So that's the issue. But the problem is all of our experiences, all of our concepts that we're having is the activity. That's the whole point. Panpsychism is still kind of physicalism. It just adds felt experience as an extra property. Right. Yeah, and the difficulty with that, first of all, welcome Goldmine. Thanks for joining. Yeah, the thing that like we talked about in the video is like, hey, perhaps there is some proto consciousness on matter, but that's not what we find in our, I guess when we're actually looking at what is affecting our, our memory and what actually contributes to our experience in the moment. So yeah, until we learn what that is, like we probably ought not to say that there is some proto consciousness in matter. Like that doesn't help us at all. Yeah, we gain so much from the actual physical mechanisms. Nelson Goodman, contraposed. I'm curious what that means now. Physicalism and phenomenalism. Big influence on Chomsky's linguistic program. To place or set in an opposite or contrasting position. Goldmine, I'm the Eric guy on YouTube. I just came to Twitch. Oh, nice. Welcome on this side. On this side of the aisle. I apologize if you feel left out when all the messages are coming from Twitch. The goal is to build both of these communities in tandem. Goodman wrote, I illustrate these two types of systems rather than define them because a precise and general distinction cannot readily be drawn. In the systems of either type that are in question here, the basic units are observable or perceptible individuals. And as we shall see, the view that the phenomenal can be distinguished as the cognitively immediate is not easily maintained. Interesting. The view that the phenomenal can be distinguished as the cognitively immediate is not easily maintained. So it's a difficult topic, that's for sure. Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, we're communicating, right? Like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with all these things is, I think this becomes more clear. Like once we start talking about what we're doing when we're communicating, when we're understanding things, etc. Like what's happening here is like it's normative, it's dynamic. We're not talking about some external truth that's absolute and static. Like once we have that framework, it's really intuitive to look through this, to make sense of the difference between, what it might feel like to think about the physical world and the physical world itself. Yeah. The issue is that people just aren't there because colloquially speaking, it's just, these are really weird ideas, like really weird. And it takes a long time for these ideas to like seep into the mainstream, which is where I come in. but we have to figure out a way to do this such that it's very intuitive and it makes sense, which is where the document comes into play. But the document currently is kind of large and no one wants to read this whole thing. So we now have to figure out how to make content. Maybe not video essays, but just content in general that makes this more bite-sized and nice. I was thinking because I'm burnt out on consciousness in a sense, but I'm also burnt out on these like video essays, these long form video essays. It just requires like 2 weeks to make one of these video essays, and oh god, I can imagine. And so I think it might be beneficial for us to like play with some other type of media or medium. And I still think, I ultimately think that short form content is the most, what's the term? Lucrative? It's the most lucrative avenue we have in terms of money, but in terms of growth. Like in terms of building a community. So, and it's also easily consumable. So I think it might be beneficial for me to now challenge myself to take up that new medium and create a bunch of short form videos. So I'll probably do that on YouTube, TikTok. Though I don't know how people get onto, like, how do people find you on TikTok from the get-go? Like, how do we funnel people into TikTok? Like YouTube, it seems like you can leverage the videos and the others, but like, do I have to post TikToks? Do I cross-post TikToks somewhere else? It seems easy that we would funnel people from TikTok onto other platforms like Twitch, or I stream on TikTok, but I don't know. Do shorts of my shit posts. Nice. 5 to 10 minute videos with clickbait titles will blow you up, King. I do agree. I need to figure out what to put in 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, it could probably even be the same format as the long form video essays. We just need a topic. I mean, honestly, I should just start reading sections of the just sections of the document to the maybe I like change it up slightly, but read those to the teleprompter, and people like Pop Philosophy on YouTube. What falls under Pop Philosophy? Is it just the general, like, what are we doing here? Start by watching TikTok. I can't stay there long. Rubs me funny. I've never watched TikTok, so I don't know how to go about that area. But I would probably just post there. I don't know if I'm gonna. Maybe I would post there, but it would probably start pointing me in the direction of philosophy talk. Rap battles between philosophers, etc. Oh no. Maybe not that pop. I think the biggest philosophy group on TikTok is the debate group. Oh man, I just don't want to do debate. It just doesn't seem fun. And I don't think I've got the bones for it. I'm too agreeable. Look at the oldest videos on Unsolicited Advice's channel. They're all 10 to 15 minutes or so. Now he's posting really long videos. The real academic place for debate is Seminar. Everything else is a letdown. Seminar. What is Seminar? Is that a platform? Oh, is a seminar. Like, is this like literally in an academic institution? Are you saying? Oh, look at this. Okay. Unsolicited advice. Okay, I didn't know what the channel this guy came from, so. Oh, we gotta get on this train. Okay, oldest. Watch this to think better. This is what we need. We need, like, in part 2 when we're doing content like this, so we can easily just pump out short videos like this. How philosophers deal with loneliness. Top 3 things I learned 2 years ago. Wow. Man, this is a big come up. A 2-year come up. Yeah, look at this. Yeah, this is probably a good case study. We should check out. I like these thumbnails too. It's got it all. Perhaps the branding isn't quite there, but evaluating Jordan Peterson's strangest religious argument. Make it make sense. Oh man. That is peak pop philosophy. Oh boy, I stay a mile away from titles like that. X things that Y. Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be tough for me to dip my toe in that type of clickbait, but we'll see. Very similar to Alex O'Connor. We're gonna have to figure out a way to somehow break through. That's in an authentic and really beneficial way. Yeah, like I should probably watch one of those videos perhaps tomorrow. Tomorrow's our video day. And just kind of see how contentful they are or substantive they are. Because yeah, I'm trying to be substantive in this space. You have to clickbait. Yeah, I think that's the case. Choose your audience. We need I kind of want to just jump around to different audiences. We need a social media manager. Amen. I don't want to do all this stuff myself. I vote for Goldmine. You already mastered both YouTube and Twitch. True. How do you know when the experience reported as a NDE occurs? By the point report is possible there's plenty of brain activity. It's entirely possible that the experience of recovery from near death is what is misreported as NDE. Oh, that's actually pretty interesting. But I'm not sure. Yo, thank you very much. Thanks for padding the numbers. All right. Oh, this was a funny one where they were saying they brought up what explanation can be made to get behind the is without using it, to define association without association. The dialectic feels appealing because it seems like what we can know for sure is that is this synthesizing of B and C. The last step to epistemological nihilism, that perhaps nothing exists, is saying that there is no known comparison of two or more things. I say you're right that I fly pretty close to the epistemological nihilism sun. However, it seems that epistemological nihilism falls into the same error, as it asserts the absence of possible knowledge using the same presuppositions of is. The way I understand it is that there isn't some objective absolute body of knowledge, yet each person experiences a world of truth in every moment. This leads me to highlight the feeling of truth over the abstract existence of it. In the case of consciousness, we feel true facts about consciousness, yet those facts are contingent on our culture, learned expectations, etc. Okay. Oh, that's it. All right, we're done. There's just been a lot of discussion on these one-off posts, unless I need a refresh. But I think that we're probably chilling. Right? We got this guy. I do think that, and I don't mean to sound demeaning here, it is incredibly unintuitive to make the logical leap to the ontological takeaways I explored in this video, especially since they seem to point us in the direction of epistemological nihilism. I think there's a way to steer us away from those pitfalls, and I look forward to exploring those ideas on my channel in the future. 500 years ago, I may not have argued against what we call consciousness as being special in the ways that are popular on the sub. I mean, back then, Darwin still hadn't given us the insight about how humans got here. But today, anyone arguing against the brain as the creator of consciousness is willfully ignorant, ignoring everything that we have discovered about the brain, and incredibly credulous about paranormal reports about disembodied minds. It's a rather blunt way of saying these things, but I generally think they're onto something. Yo, look at this. I'm going to give this a... Thank you so much. Well worth the time. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone to just appreciate what they watched. I shouldn't say that. I'm looking for the discussions too. I just wish that when people posted a comment here, like they had watched the entire video, and then they can point out a very specific thing that I shouldn't have done in the video, which I think there's probably are things that I shouldn't have done in the video. I just want, I want to get I want to get people's views that have actually seen the video, but it's somewhat difficult on this channel, or not on this channel, on this place. Oh, we got a ton of discussion since an hour ago. This is all on this guy, so this is great. You can tell bro was smirking when writing that. In this moment, I am euphoric. I have a particular set of metaphysics I want your thoughts on when you have the chance. Absolutely. Is this something you want to post somewhere, or do you want to let it rip right now? We've got nothing but time until I get tired and want to go to bed, but but I should be good for another 20 minutes, 20 to 30. We could read this some other time. This is fun stuff. This is where we make sense of how we arrive at collective knowledge. Like the fact that you and I say you as in like all of y'all, we have similar, like the fact that we both see this object and think it's a pen. It's like, what's going on there if our experience is completely subjective and unique, and if the meaning that we experience is completely contingent on our past and our upbringing and our learning, and if it's contingent on our understanding, and therefore speculative in some sense, like there is no objective external truth, what leads us to have these pragmatically similar understandings of what I'm holding here? And I'm kind of concluding the premise by saying that it's just a pragmatically similar understanding, but we walk through it. We walk through it in this epilogue. So yeah, we can have that fun at some other date. Sure it is possible but we do not make that assumption with any other conscious experience, so it is completely ad hoc to do that here. All right, plus the burden of proof. I don't know if we want to read through all this stuff. Besides, we also have many other examples of lower brain activity leading to heightened rather than reduced conscious experience. For example, hallucinations and highs caused by asphyxiation, G-force induced lost sense of consciousness, psychedelic drugs. And in some of these, we can even talk to the person while they are having the experience, such as with people who take psychedelics. So the false memory explanation does not seem very plausible. Well, the thing with psychedelics is like some aspect of it ends up being like a really weird memory issue where like after the fact, you remember having such a crazy profound experience, but you can't put it into words. And then also that, I always talk about, people that are on those experiences and they write something down and then they go and look at it later and they're just like, I don't even know what I meant with that. So probably because I'd imagine it's because what they wrote is actually quite ambiguous, but there is a way that you can interpret it such that it makes a ton of sense to them in that moment. So that's why, if anyone's taking psychedelics and they're trying to write something down, you have to be incredibly precise as to what you're trying to say, so that the person on the other side can understand it. If we can talk to them, then they have plenty of brain activity. Where did I say that? Okay, we've got a spat. What am I thinking of right now? What word? I could just say a dispute. A scuffle. Brain activity is significantly lower than normal when you take psychedelics, yet consciousness experience is way more vivid. All right. Yeah, and in the do we still have the video?
Let's build
in the where am I looking? I'm looking for this. I did include some. No, not these. These two. These are references or resources that goes farther into how psychedelics increase neural entropy by relaxing high-level beliefs, categorizes the psychological and neural commonalities across various self-transcendent states like psychedelics, meditation, flow, and near-death experiences. Like we're able to kind of see what's going on when these things happen. But that's not to take away from the actual experiences themselves. Like,
let's build a concrete.
It's not what we're trying to do here. We're about to get 100. Look at that. Exciting stuff. If I recall, the Alex O'Connor video actually didn't blow up until the day after, because that's when I posted on the Alex O'Connor subreddit. So we still have that avenue. The mods did not get back to me yet. So maybe we do just post and ask for forgiveness. I don't know if that's gonna work, but maybe they just haven't seen my question yet, or what I asked them. It was basically just, hey, like, can I post this since this is a follow-up? Hopefully they remember me. Should I join? He said, brother in Christ. I know for sure homeboy ain't a Christian. Wait, who said brother in Christ? Did someone in this discussion say brother in Christ? Because those are fighting words. My brother in Christ. I honestly don't know if I can dumb this down any further. Yo, this is toxic. All right, we can't give that an upvote. Brain activity is significantly lower than normal when you... Okay. And yet it's still sufficient for people to talk. So yeah, I imagine they're just talking past each other. Like, I imagine they're having a different conversation from each of their perspectives. So it's probably just not clicking. Like, my goal with all these when I'm responding to someone is really to try to figure out what they're getting at, and to like try to say the right thing that like connects us. But sometimes I fail at that. I mean, a lot of times I fail at that. Imagine sitting at home like, yeah, today I'm going to argue with someone on the r/consciousness subreddit about this. Hey, these are like, the thing about consciousness is it's like right there with religious and spiritual axioms, or just like strong beliefs that really ground people. So I guess I don't blame people for getting worked up about conflicting accounts, which is why we should try to be, one, open-minded still, and two, to be like delicate with these ideas and not to just like be judgmental or something like that. Get a burger. Yeah, I don't know where that's going. I don't know. Okay, what else might be new here? That's not new. Oh. Yes, there needs to be a line. The importance, right? I know you implied it's your opinion, but is there any reading that supports those three? Okay, so this was the one person who followed the three traits. I'm not aware of anyone else who has proposed this specific threshold, but various others' suggestions came close. Okay. Appreciate the feedback and extra content. Yo, look at this. I'm giving upvotes to everyone in this list. It's a positive exchange. I think we agree on the beginning of so this is what I always try to push, this is what I'm going to always try to push as like as a standard in our community, where you know, to point out where there's a convergence of understanding, and then to like go from there. I think we agree on the beginning of consciousness, but I am not yet convinced it's in parallel with the agency required to have free will. What does free will mean in this sense? I think the way that people understand free will, you know, in the sense that we arrive at kind of in the document, is like it's essentially conceptual properties about yourself. It's like, I feel that I can do things. I can pick up a pen and I can wave it around. Like these are things that are just kind of coming to me. So yeah, the level of consciousness that you would need to have in order to have free will is some level of self-consciousness in that sense. You'd have to have at least that, and then perhaps you know, there's some part of consciousness that deals with possibilities and about possibilities of action, or you know, there's the linguistic parts that I talked about that puts that into words, because maybe having free, like, yeah, do you have to actually conceptualize yourself as having free will in order for you to have free will? You know, perhaps there's other animals that have some level of self-consciousness that do have free will in that sense. So who knows? Oh, it's based around two concepts. Okay, here we go. The ground of being, the brute fact of existence, and the spirit of growth, the nature of reality to integrate, creating the structural foundation for growth. Okay, the ground of being, the brute fact of existence, and the spirit of growth, the nature of reality to integrate, creating the structural foundation for growth. All things are integrated configurations of the ground of being. It's like the substance monism from Spinoza and systems theory. Okay, I'm not familiar with Spinoza, but like the way that I always try to make this make sense in relation to other things that I know, and you know, we can consider this through the realm of two truths. Shout out to Dharmadam, where you know there's the form that truth takes, right? Like there's the brute fact of existence can only come into your experience in this form. Like it's articulated, it feels a certain way. And then we could also consider the spirit of growth, or the you know, the truth of I forget what the other truth is actually like called, but for Heidegger, this is like authentic being. This is like the being that's always towards potential. It's always, you know, you could say it's growth, but it's really, you know, it's forward moving. It is growth in a sense, like you're always growing from where you are now. You could just consider it as just perpetual change. But yeah, like you know, so as the spirit is like this aspect of reality, then there's also this second half where, you know, whatever comes to you comes to you in this form, and this, you know, it's the grounding aspect of what you're saying. So all things are integrated configurations of the ground being. So all things are disclosed in this, like I should say, all things that we come to like grasp, like anything we can grasp comes to us in this graspable form, right? It's like this articulated, felt form. But yeah, we can imagine that it's coming from the spirit. The other way to the other thing, that the example that you could easily put this onto is, you know, in a very Jordan Peterson sense, is chaos and order. You know, chaos would be this spirit of growth. You know, chaos is always attributed to nature, and then order is that thing that comes from chaos. It, you know, it comes out of chaos, or it chaos bores it. Is that the word? You bore a sun. Yeah, so you can think about it in that way too. Like, yeah, I think it works. I mean, I always argue that, you know, there's different ways we can describe like the same thing, and so it's not like there's a right rule set or a right use of words that does this thing. We're looking for the way to describe these topics that's the most accessible and practically useful. And so, yeah, Heidegger does not check those boxes. Heidegger, like being in time, is really effective, but it's also really inaccessible. So it's not what we want out of in this document that we're working on. We're trying to find really accessible ways to describe these things. But yeah, I think your system aligns with a lot of philosophy and a lot of spirituality. Well, they aren't changing anyone's minds to whatever religion or irreligion they believe in with those words. I'm guessing we're talking about something that we saw in the comments. But yeah, I agree. I doubt that people who come in here with fighting gloves on are ending up changing people's minds. In fact, they probably help other people make sense of their own position better. Now, perhaps there's an experience that leads someone to be convinced, but I'd say chaos and order would be like integration and dysfunction. When there's a higher level of integration, then that's what we call growth. A higher level of integration. So what differentiates like just a regular integration and from this higher level integration? Okay. I didn't even realize that even typing this out, I'm still not totally convinced I have free will. Yeah, so the way that we make sense of free will, I think, is super nice. It's, hey, like, we're allowed to point out that the physical world makes it clear to us that we don't have free will in the sense that the physical world's deterministic, and the phenomenology we go through in our document, which is like mindfulness. So like you do mindfulness meditation, you find out that we don't actually have free will over the thoughts that we have. So like aspects of our experience and thoughts, we don't have control over either. What we do have is the manifestation of this conceptual understanding that I can do things. Like it's something that arises from, like, we don't have control over when this thing arises, but the thing does arise in such a way that we feel like we have freedom. Now, what we point out is that we can leverage this conceptual understanding that we can do certain things, and we can even leverage it to reflect on what we understand or what we can do. We could reflect in the moment on what we can do right now to affect the future. And one of those things could actually be to affect the future in such a way that in the future, what comes to mind, like when we're thinking about our own freedom, is different. So like, what can I do right now such that tomorrow I feel like I can do this thing, at least do it more easily or more straightforward than what I feel like right now. And that's the whole part two. It's like, how do you identify and pursue your goals? So yeah, part one is coming up with this very fundamental idea that we can reflect, we can leverage our understanding to deliberately reflect upon that very understanding and reflect upon what we can do. And we that will affect the future. When we're not reflecting, things can change, our understanding can change. So it requires us to reflect periodically, intermittently, because what we might understand ourselves to do will change over time. So yeah, that's all we do in part one is building up that. And then in part two, it's just like, now that we have that understanding, how do we actually identify and pursue our goals? Okay, if jellyfish can show preference for a future state beyond what's universal to all life, then I'll agree they must have consciousness to do that. It depends what we mean by preference for a future state. In contrast to just reacting to stimulus, if they can utilize those the preference to decide and execute on, then they'll have shown adequate agency of free will for free will. Yeah, so now that this is becoming this is becoming a metric that I think is rather ambiguous. It's a definition of agency that we can take up. I don't think that's the definition that we feel that we have, but I mean, obviously we can understand that we are similarly agents in that sense, but oh no, we got a spat here as well. I responded to this. Oh no, I didn't respond to this one though. So we've got this stuff. We got considered dark. This is the dark energy people. Unless your experience have no effect in the universe, they can be observed and measured. This is just an assumption. We can trigger reports of experiences. We don't have any. So this is probably just coming into a normal discussion. What I expect from this subreddit. But yeah, unfortunately, not many people upvoting or many people downvoting. I'm not sure, but this is a great ratio we got going on here. The videos are enough to start wars. These are controversial topics. I know it seems like very chill, but we're starting wars out in here. But nevertheless, fun stuff. I'm curious if the Alex O'Connor subreddit would be a little more open to watching the video or less combative, but we'll see. That's if we post on it. Then we had I forget what the other one was. We have the philosophy of science, and then we have r/philosophy that we might do or might not do. If you look, try and get better at something like a kickflip. Whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Try and get better at something like a kickflip. You will have dysfunctional mechanics until they reach a level of integration. Oh, I see what you're saying. Until they reach a level of integration that results into a broad rotating fully under your feet, and you land and ride into the sunset. I should have reread that before. No, you're good. Right, I would just point out that you are like, at that point we're like retrospectively interpreting what was significant there. It's like, when you're learning a kickflip, you are learning like very important aspects of the whole thing as you're going through, and then you just understand that once you can actually do the kickflip, then that's like a level up. But I don't think your learning is like a stepwise function, such that you haven't integrated anything and then you've integrated something. It's like some type of continuous graph. So it's like a, it's a interpretive lens that you would put on saying, once you did the important thing, that's when you've integrated and grown. Like, I would say you grew the whole time, but Onion did a kickflip once over a person who didn't even duck. Don't have the video anymore, sadly. Oh, that's a shame. I would have loved to seen that video. All right, should we call it here? Does anyone have any final topics to send us off into the night? I was there. Very nice. Oh, what did I want to do? I wanted to go into this whole thing. Maybe we do that tomorrow. But yeah, what was it? I don't think there's.
Let's build a.
I don't think there's anything more here. So, yeah, I did have a lot of fun in the YouTube comments of the previous videos. So I'm hoping that we can get into a space that pops off the views. But yeah, chances are when the upvotes aren't high, this is probably not showing up as like, yeah, it's not prominent here. So that's gonna make it tough. Plus, this is a less popular subreddit. We got to get back to that r/Cosmic Skeptic. Not too much larger, but I think large enough, especially if we do well. But we'll see. Hopefully the mods let us in. And then there's always attempting r/philosophy. I got to find a way to communicate this that's really simple. I'll try to assume. Hey, that's what it's all about. That's what I'm trying to do with my stuff as well, and I am slowly getting better and slowly failing every single time. Check the upvote ratio. How do you check an upvote ratio for a that's what I would like to see actually, but I don't know how you do that. Is this something that I need to do on the new Reddit? Can we get to new Reddit? Does this bring us to new Reddit? Yes, it does. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's not telling us. What's going to tell us here? Is it on the new UI? Tired of ad. Oh, that's the ad. Report. Self-report. I don't know if it does. I'm thinking we're not going to be able to do that. Maybe it was an older UI. Yeah, I'm curious when that actually happened. Maybe that was an older UI. I miss those days. That was a while ago, right? Wasn't that like 6 to 8 years ago? I remember that change happening. And I think that is possible, perhaps with an extension. But I don't know if I want to get an extension just to see this. Okay, well, tomorrow is going to be a fun Friday, so bring a video recommendation that's 15 minutes or less, and we will we'll have some fun. r/unsolicited advice on YouTube seems decently visited. Oh, what is this? What is this subreddit? Alex's friend Joe Folly. What does this mean? Oh, here we go. So what is unsolicited advice on YouTube? This subreddit is for discussing about the YouTube channel. Oh my gosh, of course. Unsolicited advice. I see. Here we shall discuss philosophy, literature, and new videos from the channel. So yeah, I'm concerned. So we could do this. I'm concerned that it's not within the realms of what they... Yeah, this seems to be very much... Oh, man. A lot of this seems to be pretty... connected to him, so I don't know if I would feel comfortable doing that here. Whereas I'm hoping that we get by in the Alex O'Connor subreddit, because both the previous video and also because he's been talking about consciousness recently. Your guys' favorite philosophers? I'm gonna have a field day with that post. 6 alt accounts. They got a tournament. That would be pretty funny. Unsolicited advice is actually a great name. It's a nice armor for people who are upset at you doing advice and whatnot. And then there's also Decoding the Gurus, but unfortunately we're not able to post on here because it just doesn't line up with anything. Must relate to, yeah. Are they still doing stuff?
It was.
Whoa. 5 days ago, 2 weeks ago. Okay, they're still somewhat active. All right. Do the upvotes and downvotes ratios show on your profile? That's a good question. Where do we want to go for this? How did I just get logged out? Oh my gosh. Okay. Am I still logged in over here? Yes. Okay. I don't think so. I guess you could keep track of the. Well, no, because we're still in the positive here. It would, you know, it wouldn't affect your post karma any differently. Bruh, yeah, it's a bummer. Oh my god, look at this. John Wick? How'd I get John Wick? I don't know. The controversy main. What is the controversy main? All right, I think we also call it here. Okay, we never ended up doing those two. What was this? Oh, we were going to hit this person up. James McShine. Because they were working on interesting stuff. I'm going to keep them there. People, Shine Lab. And then we had the entire lore of Silksong. Michael Levin legit. We still have Chris Field's research summary. Why do they keep removing stuff? Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, thanks y'all for hopping in. Oh, I guess the point I'm trying to make was that within chaos and order, a system is ordered if it's still constructive, even with the disorder in the system, because the disorder is in some way integrated, or the level of integration in the system overall outweighs the dysfunction that could cause decay. I'm going to have to read that one more time. Within chaos and order, a system is ordered if it's still constructive, even within the disorder in the system, because the disorder is in some way integrated, or the level of integration in the system overall outweighs the dysfunction that could cause decay. No, that's all good. I still think this makes sense through the usual like chaos order view, where right, chaos, like this is the whole idea that chaos is always coming from order and order is always coming from chaos, and you know, you could say that there's some order in the chaos, or like, you know, there's some way to integrate the disorder, and there's There's decay that's happening within the order, so I think it lines up. Yeah. The only thing I always caution is to just make sure that whatever whatever way you're trying to describe these things, it needs to be intuitive to other people. So I mean, I guess you could go full Heidegger and you could make it so that it's like, a difficult read the first time through, and then it gets easier as you like study it. But I don't know if that's if people could afford that at this age, since there's so many competing theories now. That's all I meant by integration, though, that it's essential for growth metaphysically, right? I'm trying to figure that out. Hey, fair enough. It's all part of the grind. All right. Well, thank you all. And thanks for all the feedback and the discussions. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, have a good rest of the night. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for the chat.